Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a reading wrap up for July 2023. If you're interested in seeing what books I read last month, please stick around. As I said in my introduction, today's video is going to be a reading wrap up for July 2023. I read some good ones this month that I'm very excited to talk about. I am filming this video with my windows open. It's actually gorgeous out. I'm filming this on August 2nd. I cannot believe how good the weather is where I am. So if you do hear things in the background, I apologize, but I had to open the windows. I am, as usual, going to be referencing my Archer and Olive Amy Tangerine reading journal. This is the reading journal that I started in July 2023 and will last me until the end of the year. I do put pictures of the books that I read, quotes, genre, page count, and this is what I'm going to reference for my ratings for the books. So let's get started. The first book that we're going to talk about is actually a book that I started in June, but unfortunately did not finish until July 1st. So I'm including it in my July reading wrap up, and that is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. It definitely feels like I read this a million years ago, even though it was only a month ago. I started this in June. I wanted to read it in June, obviously, because of the title. Unfortunately, I couldn't finish it in that month. I did finish it on July 1st. I had some high expectations for this book. I've heard it's such a good romance, and I did really enjoy it. I will say it definitely dealt with some deeper subject matter than romances sometimes deal with. I really appreciated the then and now storylines, and I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was an ARC that I got through NetGalley, and this one is actually a book of poetry, and so I used it as my poetry book for July 2023. I'm trying to read at least one book of poetry every month this year, so this fulfilled that, and that is Plantains and Our Becoming by Melania, Luisa, Marte. This was definitely different from a lot of books of poetry that I have read. It definitely had some longer form poetry in it. It focused a lot on some really heavy topics. It focused a lot on immigration and retaining your ancestral culture here in the United States. It focused a lot on, you know, being treated less than or as other here in the United States when you have ancestral roots in another country. It focused a lot on our political climate, on our social climate. It was very interesting. For me, someone who identifies as Latinx, I am the child of immigrants. I am a first generation American, but I'm also a white passing person of color. And so for me, really reading about the experiences of someone who is Latin but Afro-Latina, and you know what she has dealt with regards to the way she's treated by other people, or culturally how she handles certain situations. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was another ARC that I got through NetGalley, and this one is Wanderlust by Elle Everhart. Very excited to read this one based on the title and the cover. I was really hoping that we were going to be dealing with a lot of traveling, and I'm not going to lie to you. The content of this story is pretty lost to me, meaning I can't really remember it at all. And I think that kind of goes along with my initial thoughts on it. I did rate this as a 3.5 out of 5. Not bad by any means, but certainly not something that was very above and beyond. And the fact that we're now in early August and I genuinely cannot remember a single thing about this story, I think that tracks with the rating. Yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is one that has been blowing up. I wanted to be in the mood for it so that I could have the best reading experience possible with it, because I definitely was very nervous that it wasn't going to live up to the hype for me. And that is A Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is so good. I was nervous and I was so happy that it lived up to what has been told about it by so many other people. I rated this as a 5 out of 5 star book for me. It captures you right in the beginning. It keeps a steady, high level pace throughout the entire thing. The author fits so much into this book. It's definitely a chunky book. It's not a 300-page read, but there's so much in here. There's so much jam-packed in here. I loved the main character. I loved experiencing everything she was experiencing through her eyes. I really enjoyed a lot of the side characters. I'm desperate for the next book in the series, and yeah, 5 out of 5. Highly recommend. If you haven't read it yet, if you've been putting it off because you're worried it's not going to live up to the hype, read it. It's so, so good. The next book we're going to talk about is one that I actually borrowed from one of my friends at work, and that is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is the same author that wrote The Silent Patient. I really did enjoy so much of this. I think I just really like the way that Alex Michaelides writes. I feel like his writing is easy to understand. I feel like it sucks you in and makes you want to keep going. It makes you want to figure out what's going on. But I will say that I didn't necessarily enjoy the big reveal at the end of this book. For me, I love it when I can't guess the ending or the twist, but I would rather guess the twist and have it be a twist that makes sense than not guess the twist and feel like it came completely out of left field. And I kind of feel like this twist came completely out of left field. I did not see it coming at all. I don't understand how you could have seen it coming. And for me, it was more for shock value and less for it making sense with the story. And so I did end up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I certainly didn't dislike it. I actually read it incredibly quickly. I just didn't like the ending. Next, we have another arc that I got through NetGalley, and that is The Blonde Identity by Ali Carter. Definitely super intrigued by the cover of this one and the title. Didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I will say this was such a pleasant and surprising read. It was a romantic storyline, but it was kind of set in a stolen identity spy thriller. If that makes any type of sense. It was so fun. I genuinely really enjoyed this more than I thought I was going to, and ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book we're going to talk about is a mystery thriller. This was the mystery thriller that I picked as my my July book. So just as I want to read a book of poetry every month this year, I do want to read a mystery thriller every month as well. And so I picked The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. I was a bit disappointed in this one. It's told in 3 parts. The first part is from one character's perspective, the second part is from another character's perspective, and the third part is combined perspectives. And the character perspective we get in the first part of the story, it just totally took out the enjoyment of this book for me. I couldn't even enjoy disliking her. I just disliked her. I just thought she was a nightmare, and I thought her reasoning behind what she was doing was pretty flimsy. And so by the time I got to the second part in the book, I was just like not enjoying it very much. And even though I do feel like the second part of the story, that second character's perspective added a lot to what was going on, I didn't care anymore at that point. I was just kind of reading to be done with it. And so I ended up giving this 3 stars. Again, I do feel like part 2 kind of does help to redeem certain aspects of the story, but overall, I just wasn't a huge fan of it. Next, we have another book that I was given an arc of through NetGalley, and that is Rent to Be, Sonia Hartl. This one definitely had an interesting storyline. It tried to mention some pretty interesting topics. For me, the issue is that while it mentioned some pretty interesting things, it didn't necessarily deal with those things. I didn't dislike the main character. She was kind of at a low point, and I appreciated the way the author discussed that, but I didn't necessarily get a ton out of reading this, and so I did end up rating it as a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book was another arc that I got through NetGalley. This one was actually an audiobook, and I think it might have been the only audiobook that I read this month, and that is Sun Damage by Sabine Durrant. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I think it's very middle of the road for me. I definitely thought it was a really interesting idea. It was intriguing. We basically have a woman who lives as a con artist and now has taken over someone else's identity in a sense. There was a subplot of romance in there, which I just thought was totally not necessary and would have preferred the story not having. There was just some aspects of it that were just kind of meh for me. I do think diving into this character and why she does, what she's been through was super intriguing. I just wish there would have been a little bit more payoff at the end. I feel like she tries to change her life in a sense, and she does change her life, but she also still has in her back pocket that she knows she can manipulate people, read people, and use that to her advantage. And I wish that she would have shown more growth than that. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Again, didn't love it, didn't hate it. The next book that I ended up reading was one that's also getting a lot of hype out there that I was super excited to be able to pick up, and that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I've definitely been getting into more fantasy this year and really enjoying fantasy, and after reading Fourth Wing, I desperately wanted to read something else that was fantasy. And so when this started blowing up everywhere, I was like, ooh, I need to give this a read. I'm really excited about this one. And let me tell you, this one is so good. Oh, I love it so much. It's really interesting because this is young adult, but I do not feel like this is young adult at all. Like, I would have not thought that this was a young adult story had I not gotten it in the young adult section. I loved our main character. I loved our main characters. I loved the the magical elements to this story. That was really intriguing as well. It talks about gods and things like that, but not gods that you and I have heard of, I don't believe. So the lore and mythology was also really interesting. Definitely really enjoyed this, and this is another 5 out of 5 star read for me this month. The next book that I ended up reading was another ARC. This one I actually got a physical copy of, and that is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I read this while I was away. I was able to devote kind of hours to it while I was sitting by the pool or sitting at the beach, and it definitely sucks you in right from the beginning, and it's a book that you just want to keep going with. Even the characters that aren't necessarily super likable, there's like an intrigue there that makes you want to know more about them. I like that we're using different devices to learn about these characters. There's like a podcast element to this story, which I thought was really interesting. There is an ambiguity in the ending that I personally loved, and I don't always love that in stories, but I really loved it in this one. I just thoroughly enjoyed this. I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely a really great read. And then the last book that I ended up reading during the month of July, I also read while I was on vacation. I had a little bit of an issue. So when I left for vacation, I knew I was not going to get to every book on my July TBR. I knew that I wasn't going to read Us Against You by Frederick Backman, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get to Lump, which is an ARC that's coming out in August that I was hoping to read in July. So I knew I wasn't going to get to those 2 books. Once I finished None of This Is True, I wanted to read my July Instagram challenge book, which is The Boyfriend Candidate. I brought my Kindle with me. I messed up though, and I did not actually physically download The Boyfriend Candidate onto my Kindle. I purchased it, but it wasn't on my Kindle. And when I went to connect my Kindle to my hotel internet, it wouldn't work. So I could not read The Boyfriend Candidate because I couldn't download it, which was incredibly frustrating because I've been wanting to read the book all month. So after I read None of This Was True, I did have an audiobook that I was listening to through Audible, which I did not finish in the month of July. So you'll hear me talk about that one in August. But I wanted to physically read something else. And so I'm looking through my Kindle, seeing what I actually have that's legitimately downloaded on my Kindle. And there was one book, and it was Flawless by Elsie, which is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. And I do have all of the Chestnut Spring series that's released currently on my Kindle from Kindle Unlimited, because I got Kindle Unlimited through Amazon Prime for Prime Day. But I didn't necessarily feel like I wanted to read it now. I was thinking, honestly, that it might be something I get to in the fall. But it was literally the only thing I had to read. So I did start it. I did finish it. I really enjoyed it. I think I needed it, honestly. I read a couple lackluster romances in the month of July, and I feel like I needed a good romance to like get me out of this almost like romance slump that I feel like I'm in, and it totally did that. I really liked it. I thought it was so much fun. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy it. I liked it enough that I went right into the second book in the series. The second I got Wi-Fi, I was able to download it. Literally as soon as we got to the airport when we were flying home on August 1st, I downloaded the second book in the series and started reading it right away. So yeah, that's what happened this month. I didn't get to my Instagram challenge book because I didn't have internet on my Kindle. I am planning on reading The Boyfriend Candidate. I'm planning on reading it in August along with my August Instagram challenge book. So I'm going to try to play catch up this month with that. That is going to be it for my reading wrap up for July 2023. If you have read any of these books, please leave some spoiler free thoughts down below. I love talking with people about books. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.